Noor was a pathetic, lonely loser who got rejected by every school for being weaker than a maid. So, he went to train in the mountains. After 14 years of beating his stick, he awakened godly abilities and rizzed every girl he wanted. Before all of this happened, Noor was basically just a small-town farm kid living quietly with his mom. His whole routine was feeding animals, cleaning up, and doing whatever chores kept their little place running. He wasn't anything special, just a helpful boy trying to support his sick mother. But her health kept getting worse, and one day she called him over, barely able to speak. With her last bit of strength, she told him she wanted him to stop living such a tiny life and chase the dreams he always talked about. That same night, she passed away, leaving Noor completely alone. He buried her beside his father's grave, placed flowers down carefully, and stood there for a while with nothing but silence surrounding him. After that, he went back to his empty home and tried to keep himself busy with the farm, even though every corner of the place reminded him of his parents. One night, while he was dusting the shelves, he pulled out a book from the top and suddenly remembered his dad reading it to him when he was younger. It was about adventurers, crazy brave heroes with ridiculous courage who traveled the world, fought danger head-on, and always protected their friends. Sitting there holding the book, Noor remembered what his mom had told him before she died. That hit him hard. He realized he couldn't stay stuck in the same place forever. So he made up his mind. He was leaving the village in the morning and heading to the capital to try becoming an adventurer. But before he left, his big brain plan was to toss a giant stack of hay into the animal pen, thinking the animals would slowly eat through it until the day he came back, whenever that would be. He said one last goodbye to his parents' graves, grabbed his tiny pack, and began walking toward the capital. Once he reached the city, he instantly searched for the Adventurers Guild. He found it pretty easily, but the moment he walked in, the guild master took one look at him, scrawny little boy, and shooed him away like some dog shit on foot. Noor, desperate, mentioned that both his parents had passed. That softened the guild master a bit, so he decided to at least guide him. He explained that Noor couldn't just become an adventurer. He needed skills, training, and actual talent. So he sent Noor to the royal training schools to learn something before registering. Noor started with the swordsman school, but after 3 entire months, the only thing he mastered was parrying. Just one move. Because of how embarrassingly slow he was, the instructor threw him out like shit. Even after being treated like trash, Noor still refused to give up. He next tried the warrior school to test his strength. A few months in, they realized he barely improved at all and kicked him right out again like trash. So Noor tried his "maybe I'm secretly a master archer" phase and joined the hunter school. That didn't last long either. The instructor told him he had the talent level of a wet sock and tossed him out because he kept breaking every bow he touched. Running out of physical options, he tried magic. The magician looked at him and straight up said Noor might be the worst magic learner in the entire world, possibly record-breaking levels of bad. Even the cleric said he was hopeless and could only heal tiny scratches, nothing bigger. After going through school after school for an entire year and failing at everything, Noor returned to the guild, hoping maybe he could still join as an adventurer. The guild master told him he might call the Hall of Fame because no one had ever been this bad at every single skill. Crushed, Noor left the capital and walked home depressed and embarrassed. But even then, he didn't quit. He figured, fine, I'll just train everything I know, no matter how basic, over and over until I get better. For 3 years straight, he practiced parrying non-stop. He got so good he could block 100 wooden swords, but still couldn't learn a single new skill. He kept training so hard that the wooden swords kept snapping in his hands. 10 more years passed. 10 years of obsessive training. By then, Noor could parry 1,000 swords at once, but still had 0 extra abilities. Still, he felt strong enough to try again, so he left his sad little farm and went back to the Adventurers Guild. The girl at the counter looked at him like he was delusional and said his ugly ass can't get register here. But the guild master, who remembered him instantly, showed up and invited him for a drink. After seeing that Noor was still talentless, the man told him how adventurer ranks worked. There were 5 ranks, and E rank was the lowest, but Noor wasn't even good enough for E rank. Then he revealed something even the public didn't know. There was an even worse hidden rank below E rank, F rank. It was so embarrassing that being not an adventurer was actually more respectable than being in F rank. People in that rank weren't allowed to take dangerous missions. They could only accept small, boring chores like moving boxes, cleaning, cooking, or running errands. Shockingly, Noor loved the idea. He signed up immediately and proudly took his F-rank card. He spent his days completing random tasks, cleaning streets, cooking food, carrying heavy crates, helping old ladies, even climbing trees to rescue cats. For the first time in his life, he felt helpful. One afternoon, after finishing a gutter cleaning job for his usual old client, he went to a nearby mine to help lift supplies. While he was working, he suddenly heard a terrified scream echoing from inside. Without thinking twice, Noor sprinted into the mine like some fearless hero. Inside, he found a massive minotaur attacking a group of knights who were desperately trying to protect a cute girl. The knights were getting destroyed, thrown around like rag dolls, while the girl stared at the monster, accepting her death. Noor grabbed the nearest rocks and started pelting the minotaur just to distract it. Then he picked up a sword, using the only technique he had mastered, and began parrying the monster's attacks. When the minotaur charged at the girl, Noor jumped in front of her and blocked the attack again, even though the sword shattered in his hands. His father's old words echoed in his mind: real adventurers risk everything for others. With only the broken hilt left, Noor pushed all his strength into one final parry. Somehow, he managed to deflect the minotaur's deadly strike, sending its axe flying. The blade spun through the air and sliced the monster's huge head clean off. The girl tried to talk to Noor, but he just walked away quietly, thinking he barely survived fighting some big cow. He didn't even realize he had killed a deadly monster. The knights rushed in to help the girl, stunned by what had happened, while Noor just wandered through town, believing he still needed more training. Back in the cave, Lady Lindbergh, the girl he saved, sat there, shocked, replaying the moment in her head. Soon, another girl, Ines, rushed inside, apologizing over and over because she was supposed to protect Lady Lindbergh but failed completely. Lady Lindbergh comforted her, saying it was fine. After all, she wanted to become an adventurer someday, and if she couldn't defend herself, then she wasn't ready yet. At that moment, a knight named Dalkin arrives to take the princess home. The next morning, Prince Ryan meets up with Dalkin and tells him in detail about what Lynn said. He explains that there's no chance that Minotaur just randomly wandered into the area. It had to be summoned on purpose. Monsters like that don't just walk around nearby. They normally live deep inside the lower levels of the dungeon where only crazy people go. Dalkin agrees with his guess and adds another important piece of info. A top-level mage named Awakens checked out the ring that was used to call the Minotaur, and the magic signature on it was from the magic nation known as Destabilize. Hearing that, Rain instantly gets a good idea of who is probably behind the whole thing, but instead of jumping into that topic, he pushes it aside for later. Right now, he's more curious about something else. He asks Dalkin if they managed to track down the insane warrior who destroyed the Minotaur in just a few seconds, like it was nothing. Dalkin says their secret special ops group tried tailing the guy, but according to them, he literally vanished on the spot right in front of their eyes, like he just disappeared into thin air. While Rain is stressing over who this mystery monster slayer could be, Noor just casually walks into the Adventurers Guild like it's any normal day. The guild master spots him immediately and rushes over, looking worried. He asks Noor if he's alright, since nobody saw him anywhere after the monster appeared the previous day. Noor explains that as soon as he noticed he was being followed, he decided to just head back home instead of hanging around. He apologizes for disappearing and making the guild master worry. The guild master starts going on and on about how terrifying that demon-class beast was, explaining that only a truly strong hero should be able to take down an A-ranked monster like that. Meanwhile, Noor is standing there thinking he just got lucky and that it wasn't that big of a deal. Thanks to growing up on a farm, he honestly still believes he only fought some kind of crazed giant cow, and not a legendary dungeon monster. After giving him a whole speech about how insane the situation was, the guild master hands Noor his reward money for completing the job. But before Noor can quietly leave, Lynn suddenly appears at the doorway. She tells everyone that she had to use a special detection type skill just to locate where Noor was. The moment she starts talking to him, all the people in the guild stop what they're doing and start watching them closely. Noticing all the eyes on them, Lynn suggests that they step outside and says she'll use a concealment spell so nobody can listen in or sense their presence. Noor is confused about why everyone is acting so stiff and serious around her, still not realizing that she's actually the princess of the kingdom and a really important person. The guild master quickly leans over to Noor and quietly tells him not to say anything dumb or do something embarrassing. A few moments later, Lynn finds a calm, empty spot outside the guild. She activates her magic to hide them from others, and then turns to Noor to properly thank him. She explains that by stopping the Minotaur, he didn't just save her, he basically saved the entire city from disaster. Noor, however, is still completely clueless about how big of a deal that was. In his mind, he only fought a rampaging beast and somehow didn't die. He even apologizes for jumping in during the battle and says she probably would have taken care of the monster herself using her mage powers if he hadn't interfered. Lynn keeps insisting that she is truly grateful, then politely asks if he would be willing to come meet her father, the king. Noor immediately refuses in a respectful way, telling her she really doesn't have to reward him or do anything extra. But Lynn isn't having it. She says she has to do something to pay him back and offers to give him anything he wants. When he refuses again, she starts getting emotional and stubborn. She won't move or give up until he says yes. Finally, Noor sighs and agrees to meet her father, but he tells her not to give him any more gifts or favors on top of that. A short while later, they reach her family's massive palace. Noor takes a moment just to stare at the huge place, shocked by how gigantic the estate is compared to his tiny farm life. After he recovers a bit, Lynn leads him inside the palace. On the way in, they bump into Ines. Lynn explains that Noor is the person who saved her life and asks Ines where her father currently is. After greeting Lynn, Ines tells her that the king is in a meeting with Rain at the moment. While she's talking, Ines throws Noor a sharp, deadly glare that feels like a warning. Still, she offers to escort them deeper into the palace. As they walk down the hallway, they run into a narcissistic knight named Gilbert, who clearly loves himself a bit too much. He immediately points his spear right at Noor's face and demands to know who this random guy is. Ines tells Gilbert to stop acting tough and to drop the aggressive attitude since Noor is Lynn's personal guest. But as they walk past him, she quietly whispers to Gilbert that he should tag along just in case they end up needing to send Noor back home in a coffin. At the same time, in the audience room, Ryan is explaining the situation to King Clay. He says that Derida's most likely set up the attack on Lynn because they were denied access to the valuable relics inside the dungeon. King Clay says that Derida's is clearly trying to stir up trouble and possibly start a war between the nations. Right around then, Lynn walks into the room with Noor behind her. Everyone present kneels and shows their respect toward the king, but Noor just casually walks straight up to Clay and says he only came because Lynn asked him to. Clay approaches him, grabs his arm, and sincerely thanks him for saving his daughter's life. He then asks Noor if there's anything he wants, any wish, reward, or special favor. As usual, Noor tries to reject all offers and says he already has enough and doesn't need anything special. After thinking it over, Clay turns around and grabs a big, unevenly shaped sword from behind the throne. He holds it out to Noor and offers it as a gift. Noor is stunned as soon as he feels how insanely heavy the sword is, and he gets even more concerned when he notices Ryan staring at the weapon with a worried face. So Noor asks if this sword is some kind of important artifact. Clay calmly claims that it's just some random blade he picked up during an old quest, making it sound like it's nothing special. Noor believes him and accepts the gift. Clay then tells him to give it a test swing. Noor casually lifts the sword with one arm and swings it through the air, and the sheer force almost smashes all the windows of the throne room. The shockwave is so strong that open Lynn and Ines floodgates, while Rain and Gilbert are frozen in disbelief at what they just saw. Instead of being scared, Clay starts laughing loudly, clearly impressed. He then asks Noor if he's willing to become Lynn's teacher and help train her. Noor politely refuses again, saying that Lynn should have the freedom to choose whoever she wants as her master. Hearing that, Clay finally lets him go without pushing further. On his way out of the palace, Noor looks at the heavy sword and randomly comes up with the genius idea of using it as a tool for digging and cleaning gutters, treating a powerful weapon like a simple work tool. Just as he's about to leave the palace grounds, Ines stops him and asks for a bit of his time. She apologizes for being rude when they first met and explains that her entire life is dedicated to protecting Lynn and her family, so she tends to be harsh towards strangers. She thanks him once again for protecting Lynn and asks for his name. When he tells her, she is clearly shocked on the inside, but she hides it quickly and goes back to her serious expression. She tells him that if he ever needs help, he can count on her, but in the same breath, she also threatens to give him a few more scars if he ever talks to the king so casually again. Right after she returns inside, Gilbert shows up and asks Noor if he would like to spar. Noor agrees, and a few minutes later, Gilbert takes him to a training area and tells him to choose whatever weapon he wants to use. Noor thinks this is the perfect time to finally test all the years he spent training by himself, so he picks up a wooden practice sword and walks into the arena. As soon as the match begins, Gilbert launches a crazy fast series of strikes with his spear, moving at a speed that would normally overwhelm most fighters. But Noor dodges every single attack with ease, slipping past the spear like he's done this 1,000 times. After a bit of this, Noor starts to think Gilbert might not be fighting seriously and may be going easy on him. Noor actually asks him to stop holding back. Everyone around them freezes in shock at the nerve he has to say that. Gilbert, however, keeps his cool and decides to grant his request. He suddenly increases his speed to 3 times what it was before. Noor notices that Gilbert is clearly moving faster now, but even then, he manages to avoid every attack, reading the movements, and stepping out of the way at the perfect moment. Gilbert tries to hit him with a strong surprise attack aimed at Noor's head, but Noor slips under it like it's nothing and dodges at the very last second. After avoiding several more high-speed strikes, Noor tells him to crank it up again. This time, Gilbert gets visibly annoyed. He finally decides to fight at full power, using all of his strength, speed, and skill. Even so, Noor still evades every blow, though this time he starts feeling guilty, thinking Gilbert might be getting frustrated. Gilbert then unleashes a powerful finishing technique that sends dust and dirt exploding through the entire training room, covering everything in a thick cloud. When the dust finally settles, the onlookers can see Noor standing on the opposite side of the field, unharmed. Noor decides to call it quits and says he surrenders, not because he was losing, but because he doesn't want things to get even more awkward or humiliating for himself in front of everyone. A little later, Noor finally exits the palace and hopes he never has to visit again. Outside, Gilbert's subordinates are trying to convince themselves that Noor only survived the match because Gilbert used a wooden spear, continuing to hype up Gilbert like he's unbeatable. Gilbert, however, remembers his own past. He thinks back to when he first picked up a spear and immediately felt like it was made for him. As the years passed, he defeated every opponent he faced in a one-on-one duel, to the point where fighting became boring. That's why he moved to the capital to search for powerful fighters among the royal guards or the special corps responsible for protecting the royal family. But even there, he rarely found anyone who could give him a real challenge. The only person who came close was Master Sig, who once joined him on the training grounds to talk about his obsession with finding a worthy rival. Sig had suggested that he fight Inez, but Gilbert said even she wasn't strong enough to beat him in a normal duel. He then asked Sig if he ever got tired of training weak students at the Swordsman Academy. Sig reminded him that they needed as many properly trained soldiers as possible to protect the kingdom and told him that one day, someone stronger would definitely appear. Back in the present, Gilbert replays his match with Noor again and again in his mind. He thinks about how casually Noor spoke to King Clay earlier, how calmly he accepted defeat, and how Gilbert had to use his lethal Darkgrave move just to try to land even one solid hit. Then, he notices the wide cracks in the floor where Noor had been moving and realizes just how much power Noor was putting into his body while dodging those high-speed jabs. At the same time, Noor is walking away from the palace, remembering how he had to use both physical reinforcement and his feather step type spell together just to keep up with Gilbert's speed. Even with all that, he still believes he barely survived and just got lucky enough to make it out in one piece. The following morning, Noor is already outside using the massive sword, like it's a regular backyard tool. He drags it through the gutters like a giant metal rake, happily watching how easily it scoops out piles of dirt and trash. He actually gets excited because the sword, which looks like it could cut a mountain in half, works better than any cleaning tool he's ever used. After hours of non-stop work, he takes a break in the woods and finally realizes he has no more tasks lined up for the next couple of days. Since the entrance to the dungeon got completely sealed off, the construction company doesn't need him for repairs or cleanup. That means he's basically jobless for a bit. While sitting there with nothing to do, Noor starts imagining random uses for the sword. Maybe it could be a boat paddle, or a giant pizza tray, or even a weird cooking tool. In the end, he decides he might as well open a tiny grill stand during his free time. The only spell he ever learned from Awakens was a baby-sized flame spell, so he figures he can at least use that to cook food. Just then, Lynn appears out of nowhere. Noor tries to greet her normally, but immediately remembers Inez threatening to stab him if he talked too casually to the princess. Before he can overthink it, Lynn tells him to drop the formal tone and just call her by her name. She then asks if she can become his assistant, explaining how helpful she'll be and how much she can contribute. Noor politely rejects her offer, saying he's fine on his own. Lynn refuses to accept his answer at all. This time, however, Noor also stands firm and refuses to give in. Frustrated, Lynn starts showing off every powerful spell she knows, blasting wind, fire, lightning, and basically flexing everything she can do just to change his mind. Noor, now annoyed by all the unnecessary destruction she's creating, still turns her down. To convince him, she starts talking about all her achievements and accomplishments, hoping he'll reconsider. Instead, Noor suddenly realizes something important. She really believes he's some superpowered hero hiding his strength. To break her fantasy, he shows her what his tiny flame spell looks like. It's small, weak, and honestly kind of sad. A few minutes later, Lynn heads back toward the city. Along the way, she thinks about an old legend she heard as a child, a story about a young boy who went through every training school in the city but failed every single time. People said it was just a myth, because no one could physically survive 2 training programs in a row, let alone all of them. But after witnessing Noor's cow fight in the dungeon, she starts connecting the dots. She also remembers a moment from years ago, when Awakens showed her the strongest possible version of the tiny flame spell. When she activates her own version now, she can't stop thinking about the giant fireball Noor casually summoned and how he mentioned having 5 other skills just as strong. That thought makes her embarrassed for showing off her spells earlier because, compared to Noor, her abilities are nothing. At the same time, she becomes confused about why someone that strong lives such a simple, quiet life. A few hours later, she spots Noor inside the city again, and decides she'll follow him everywhere until he finally understands that she's capable and worth helping. Meanwhile, Rain sits alone, wondering if King Clay had completely lost his mind when he handed the great black sword to Noor like it was a spare umbrella. Years ago, when Ryan was still an adventurer, he joined a legendary team called the Sovereign Six on a mission into the deepest part of the dungeon. During that mission, he found the sword lodged deep underground, its shape oddly curved and damaged. He was fascinated by its strange form and brought it back to the city. The city's strongest smiths and magicians tested everything they had on the blade, but not a single person managed to scratch it. Even after using their strongest skills, the sword remained unmoved. This scared the entire city because the sword was clearly damaged by something in the past, meaning whatever caused that damage must be unbelievably powerful. Rain tries to stop obsessing about Noor and accepts that this clueless guy might actually be tied to some great future event. The next morning, Noor eats breakfast with Lynn, then heads straight to the guild to get a job. His plan is simple: the sooner Lynn sees he's a normal, useless guy, the sooner she'll stop following him around. When they arrive, the guild master is shocked to see the princess walking in with the city's most famous gutter cleaner. Lynn tells him to relax and treat her like any regular adventurer. The guild master instantly understands Noor wants work, so he suggests they form a party and go deal with a group of goblins, causing trouble in the woods outside town. Noor's eyes immediately light up, because he never expected to be trusted with any job more dangerous than sweeping trash or moving crates. But before they can start, the guild master reminds him that Lynn has to agree to form a party with him. Noor looks worried, but Lynn quickly reminds him that she promised she'd help him with anything. She accepts the request without hesitation. Noor grabs the black sword and runs toward the door, but the guild master calls him back because in his excitement, he forgot to ask about the quest details. The guild master explains that there's a chance they won't find any goblins at all, since their numbers have dropped rapidly over the past few days for unknown reasons. Later, Noor and Lynn reach the Forest of Death. After searching for a while, Lynn's detection skills still pick up nothing. Noor decides they should go deeper into the woods. A few minutes later, Lynn suddenly stops and says she sensed the presence of a strong monster just ahead. But only for a split second. Noor immediately decides to check it out. They spot something rustling in the trees. A moment later, a gigantic goblin, the size of a giant, steps out. Lynn immediately remembers the Goblin Emperor, a failed magical experiment that mutated the species and turned it into a monster no one should mess with. When Noor tells her to focus and lock in, she decides to follow his lead. The Goblin Emperor starts ripping full-grown trees out of the ground and throwing them like spears. Noor blocks each one using his parry skill, while Lynn blasts it with her strongest spells, but the monster just keeps regenerating at insane speed. Lynn realizes the problem: as long as the mana stone embedded in its forehead remains intact, the goblin will regenerate endlessly. Noor tells her to use her Wind Blast spell to launch him straight toward the monster. Lynn hesitates, telling him the blast will tear his body apart. Noor tells her to trust him and focus on the sword. Lin fires the wind blast. Noor is launched with terrifying force, almost losing consciousness from the sheer speed. At the last moment, he regains focus, parries the goblin's next attack, and strikes the mana stone right out of its head. While the monster loses control and thrashes in pain, Lin grabs the stone. Noor then tells her to finish it quickly so it doesn't suffer. She slowly burns the goblin until it collapses into nothing. Later, Ryan hears everything and gets worried again. The Secret Corps members explain how the Goblin Emperor managed to hide for several days, and reveal that the Mana Stone likely came from the holy theocracy of Mithra. This scares Ryan even more, because the kingdom already has elite mages who should have detected such strong magic immediately. While the discussion continues, Noor and Lin return to the guild to report everything. The guild master listens to their story and assumes Lin did all the work, while Noor just watched from behind. But when Noor describes how big the goblin was and talks about the Mana Stone, the guild master starts questioning whether they actually fought a normal goblin. He then asks for proof, expecting the remains of the monster. Noor explains they had to burn it completely to ash. Hours later, Ryan reads through multiple reports from citizens complaining about strange events happening around the kingdom. After studying every report carefully, he realizes the rival nation of Deridas has already begun infiltrating the kingdom. He orders the Secret Corps to investigate the affected areas immediately and also commands them to summon the Sovereign Six. As they sprint off, Rain grows even more worried, knowing they aren't prepared for the massive chaos that's about to hit the kingdom. After Noor and Lin wrapped up their first monster job, the guild master tossed them some extra cash as a small reward. With that money, they grabbed dinner together. Lin dug into her grilled meat like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted, practically humming with happiness. Noor sat across from her, wondering if she planned to trail after him all the way back home too, since she hadn't left his side all day. Before the thought could bother him more, she finally stood up and said she needed to return to the palace. Noor thanked her sincerely for helping him on the quest, but before they could part ways, Rain appeared out of nowhere. Without warming up to the topic, Rain asked Noor to travel to a mountainside city for an important task. The sudden request stunned Noor, but Rain promised he'd get paid well and insisted Noor was the only person they trusted enough for the job. The next morning, Noor was sticking his head out of a fancy carriage window, enjoying every second of the smooth ride. It felt unreal to him, someone who grew up on a tiny farm, now sitting inside luxury transportation. While he was busy enjoying the view, he noticed Lin looking unusually down. Noor tried to cheer her up by talking about the scenery, the mountains, and the open sky, but she cut him off with an apology for dragging him into a sudden journey. He reassured her that he didn't mind, especially since Ryan had already promised compensation. The night before, Ryan explained the plan clearly. They would wait in the mountain district until they received a special message. That message would decide whether they returned home or continued deeper into the holy theocracy of Mythil. Lin, still tense, worried about what might be happening back in the capital. Ines immediately told her not to panic and promised she would protect her no matter what. Rain had also told Ines to join them. His reasoning was simple: if Deridas attacked the kingdom and things went terribly wrong, Lin needed to be far away from danger. After some time on the road, they stopped beside a quiet stream to take a break. Noor sat under a tree to relax. Out of nowhere, Ines sat beside him and apologized again for involving him in such a dangerous mission. Noor waved it off, telling her she didn't need to worry so much. He jokingly added that he could always run if something went bad. Ines told him there'd be no need for running because she could protect him with her shield. That caught his curiosity. He had never actually seen her fight. To answer him, she summoned her divine shield right in front of his eyes, a glowing barrier that radiated raw power. She explained calmly that barely anything in the world could break through it. Noor studied the shield closely and remembered what Lin told him about Gilbert's insane abilities. That made him realize how powerful all of them truly were. He praised Ines honestly, but his compliment pulled her into her past, a painful memory of when she lived at an orphanage and accidentally hurt a close friend because she couldn't control her own powers. A healer named Sane saved the girl's life, and afterward, Awaken revealed the truth. Her power was strong enough to destroy entire nations if she ever lost control. Because of that danger, Dandalg, the legendary shield master, took her in and trained her for years. A few days ago, Noor mentioned Dandalg's name, and it reminded Ines how Dandalg used to speak about a certain someone during missions. She used to feel jealous because Dandalg admired that unknown person so much. But when Noor arrived at the palace with Lin, she finally understood who Dandal's favorite must have been, and the jealousy made sense. Once their break ended, they continued the journey. Noor noticed a weird pattern in the tall grass and pointed it out. Inez brushed it off, but Lin checked and instantly ordered the carriage to stop. The pattern was moving. She cast a revealing spell, ripping apart a magical camouflage that hid a massive black dragon right in front of them. At that same moment in the capital, chaos exploded. Monsters started appearing across the kingdom. A soldier rushed into King Clay's office, panicked, reporting that the creatures were attacking everywhere. Rain told him to focus on evacuating civilians, while the adventurers and the Sovereign Six handled the fighting. After the soldier left, Clay admitted that Destabilize wasn't bluffing. They were clearly trying to destroy the kingdom by spreading their forces thin. Ryan at least felt relieved knowing Lin wasn't in the city during the attack. Back in the field, a young boy walking beside the dragon collapsed when Lin's spell shattered the magical seal. Without thinking, Noor sprinted toward him and stood between the boy and the angry dragon. Inez yelled for him to return, but Noor refused, raising his weapon to block the blow. Inez quickly told Lin to use her magical vision. When Lin activated it, she froze. The boy wasn't human. He was a demon. Ryan had recently explained that demon folk once controlled powerful monsters and nearly erased the holy theocracy of Mithra. Because of that, humans hunted demons almost to extinction. Thinking about those bloody events, Lin realized why a demon child would be leading a black dragon toward the kingdom. The dragon unleashed a deadly blast of poisonous mist. Reen, who was farther away, got caught in it immediately. The poison melted everything it touched, draining the life out of him. Lin tried to run to him, but Inez blocked her with her shield and explained that no one survived black dragon poison at close range. The dragon swelled up for another attack. Inez expanded her shield to protect Lin and silently apologized to Noor for not being able to keep her promise to safeguard him too. One of the dragon's claws slammed against the shield. Through the shimmering glow, Inez saw Noor still standing, still fighting, still blocking. In that moment, she finally understood why Dandalg respected him. But Noor was reaching his limit. After several more clashes, the monster overpowered him and knocked him to the ground. Noor lay there, exhausted and barely conscious, quietly accepting that he might finally reunite with his parents in the afterlife. At that same time, the demon boy Rollo drifted into memories from years ago. He remembered being thrown into a filthy prison with other demon folk, living off tasteless scraps of bread and whatever the guards threw at them. One day, during the daily fight for food, he accidentally stared at a guard too long. The guard dragged him into another cell and beat him until he vomited blood. When Rollo gathered the courage to ask what he did wrong, the guard lost control and beat him harder, telling him demons had no right to speak. As time went on, humans used Rollo and the other demons as punching bags to vent their anger. Eventually, Rollo unlocked the ability to read minds. When the guards discovered his new ability, they beat him even more out of fear. Later, the same guard captured a black dragon and forced Rollo to guide it to the Clay Kingdom. If he succeeded, the demon prisoners would get better treatment. If he failed, the torture would be worse than anything he had faced. During the journey, Lin's spell accidentally destroyed the magic seal, controlling the dragon, causing it to attack before Rollo could regain control. Terrified of failing and causing more suffering for his people, Rollo accepted that death might be easier. But a human stepped between him and the dragon. Noor. Rollo watched, stunned, as Noor took the poison head-on, then used a tiny healing spell to cleanse both of them. Even when the dragon kept spitting poison, Noor shielded him and absorbed most of the damage himself. No human had ever protected Rollo. The last thing Rollo saw before Noor collapsed was someone willingly risking his life for a demon he had never even met. A long time before all the chaos in the present, Noor was still figuring out how to survive on his own after failing every adventurer exam he took. With nothing else to do, he wandered into the forest to look for herbs so he could cook something simple for dinner. He eventually boiled everything together into a homemade soup, proud of himself for managing the recipe. But right after eating a few bites, his vision blurred and he collapsed in a puddle of his own blood. That's when he realized he had picked a herb that was extremely poisonous. If it weren't for his tiny heal spell, constantly keeping him just above death, he would have been gone by morning. When the sun finally rose, Noor forced himself to crawl over to the stream, washing out the poison the best he could. While recovering, he found a tiny handbook his mother had created back when he was a child. It listed which plants were safe and which ones were deadly. Even though he still felt sick, he didn't rest. He pushed through his discomfort and continued his daily routine of training. The strange thing was, his body suddenly felt normal again much faster than it should have. Curious, he returned to the forest to gather more herbs. But while picking plants, he stepped on a poisonous flower, the same one that almost killed him, and a venomous spiked snake shot out and latched onto his leg. Noor fainted almost instantly. When he woke up on the ground, he discovered that not only had he survived, but the venom was completely gone from his system. Later that day, he roasted the snake over a fire and ate it. Only then realizing something insane, his body had somehow developed immunity to poison. Instead of being grateful or thanking the heavens, Noor did what only Noor would do. He kept testing how far his body could go. He let more snakes bite him, ate poisonous insects, drank toxic liquids, and purposely consumed dangerous materials, like a crazy person doing experiments on himself. After months of this insane habit, he found out that he could handle almost any poison. Only extremely strong doses knocked him out for a few minutes. Jumping back to the present, that strange immunity once again saved his life. Once he confirmed Rollo was safe, Noor charged back toward the black dragon and blocked its attacks, chopping off its claws one after another. The dragon, frustrated, gathered its strongest poison blast. Lin screamed for him to get out of the way. Instead, Noor rammed his sword straight into the dragon's open mouth. The explosion of poison detonated inside its body, burning it from the inside until it crumbled apart. As the remains melted into sludge, Noor walked over to Rollo and asked if he was hurt. Rollo quickly explained that he had been taking the dragon to the capital. Noor, who genuinely believed the creature was just a giant frog, panicked and thought he had ruined some important delivery. He pictured Rollo carefully raising the frog like a farm animal and felt bad, but Rollo assured him it wasn't a problem. Curious, Noor asked how he managed to get a beast that big to follow him. Rollo hesitantly revealed his ability to control monsters. He expected Noor to run away or attack him, but instead, Noor lit up like he had just heard the coolest thing ever. He called Rollo's skill incredible and started rambling about all the things someone with a power like that could do. Rollo, confused, reminded him that demon folk like him commonly had that ability and asked why Noor wasn't afraid. Noor genuinely didn't understand the question. After all, why would he be scared? Rollo slowly explained that demon folk were usually feared or hated. But Noor simply told him that someone with his powers could be extremely helpful to people, which hit Rollo harder emotionally than any beating he'd ever received. Rollo began crying and asked if someone like him could actually be useful. Noor stepped forward to comfort him, but Lin suddenly ran up with panic in her eyes. She couldn't understand how Noor was still alive, since black dragon poison was supposed to be impossible to survive. Noor raised his arm and showed her he was perfectly fine. Seeing this, Lin remembered a rare technique Sane once mentioned, Sacred Spirit, an S-tier purification skill that clears poison out of the body, but it took Sane decades to master. Noor, however, had reached that level in only 14 years without even realizing it. When Noor asked her to check on Rollo, Lin grew worried about what he was. Noor suggested taking Rollo with them in the carriage, but Lin and Inez immediately said no because demon folk were too dangerous. Noor pushed back, refusing to leave Rollo behind. Inez took a closer look and realized Rollo wasn't dangerous. He looked like a starving slave. Lin also realized she was judging him based on rumors instead of facts. After seeing his fragile state up close, she agreed that they should help him. But Inez explained that they couldn't take him into the holy theocracy of Mithra, because demon folk had been banned long ago. Just as they were trying to think of a plan, a blindfolded mercenary named Zadu appeared. He asked Rollo why he hadn't completed his mission. Noor quickly asked if he was the one who forced Rollo to handle the dragon, but Zadu said he was just hired labor. He only came to take Rollo back. Noor didn't understand until Zadu casually mentioned that Rollo's dead body would bring in a generous reward. Before Noor could respond, Zadu lunged at him. Noor blocked the attack and demanded an explanation. Zadu said he planned to do his clients a favor by killing Rollo himself and delivering the corpse. He attacked again and again, but Noor blocked every strike flawlessly. Lin watched in disbelief, unable to follow their movements. Inez pulled Lin back, realizing they were up against someone far out of their league. Zadu tried to leap past Noor to reach Rollo, but Noor intercepted him, shattered his sword, and shoved him away. Zadu took a moment to rethink and then decided Noor should die first. With terrifying speed, he punched Noor hard enough to send him rolling across the ground. Noor felt the difference instantly. This opponent wasn't like the monsters he had faced before. Zadu unleashed a torrent of strikes, pushing Noor into the defensive. Noor blocked as many as he could, but it was clear this was the toughest fight he'd ever been in. Lin wanted to help, but Ines held her back, warning her that Noor was fighting Deadman Zadu, a former S-rank adventurer. Years earlier, Ines had walked into a Sovereign 6 meeting to ask why a certain criminal was marked as dead, even though the case wasn't closed. Dandalg recognized the name immediately and explained that the death was only recorded to stop people from hunting him down. Zadu had become an S-rank adventurer at a young age, rose to the top purely through violence, and answered only to the highest bidder. Because of his brutally efficient nature, countless adventurers sought his head. But the more they hunted him, the more he killed, wiping out entire squads. He even accepted a contract once and destroyed an entire country alone. After that, the kingdom pretended he was dead to keep challengers away. Back in the wheat field, Zadu realized something wasn't normal about Noor. When he complained about losing all his swords, Noor apologized and offered to pay for them. Zadu laughed it off and realized Noor's strength came from his weapon. He threw his last sword into the air. The blade shattered into hundreds of silver cross-shaped projectiles, all aimed at Noor and Rollo. Noor blocked as many as he could, shielding Rollo with his body. Zadu warned that he could keep creating more crosses forever. Ines realized Noor couldn't hold out forever and wanted to help, but her duty was to protect Lin. Her mind screamed at her to stay back, but her heart forced her to act. She finally asked Lin for permission. Lin nodded. Zadu launched another wave of crosses. Before they could hit, Ines jumped into the fight, activated her shield, and blocked the attack, then followed up with a counterstrike to draw Zadu's attention. But the crosses kept slipping through gaps. Noor racked his brain, grabbed the sharp fangs he took from the black dragon, and asked Ines to open a small gap in her shield. He channeled physical enhancement, tripled his arm strength, and threw the dragon fangs at Zadu's silver crosses. Each collision shattered the projectiles instantly. Zadu suddenly appeared behind Ines, aiming to stab her eye, but Noor leaped in and blocked it, asking politely if Zadu could stop trying to attack from behind. Zadu then noticed his strongest weapon breaking in half. Shocked, he asked what Noor's sword was made of, then attacked again. After several minutes of failing to land a single hit and losing every blade he had, Zadu backed off. He decided the fight was pointless. Noor still had plenty of strength left, and his entire sword collection was now scrap metal. Noor apologized again for breaking his weapons. Before leaving, Zadu warned them about a blazing celebration waiting at the capital, and told Rollo to thank whichever god protected him. Then, with one final surprise strike, he vanished into the fields. After the fight with Zadu, everyone headed back to the carriage to figure out what he meant by that celebration happening in the capital. Lin thought it might be smart to return and check it out herself, but the moment she suggested going back, Rollo panicked and told them returning was impossible. Noor reminded him that taking a demon folk into Mithra wasn't allowed anyway, but Rollo insisted that wasn't the main problem. He said another monster way, stronger than the black dragon, was heading straight toward the capital. According to him, that beast could wipe out the entire city without even trying. Hearing that, Lin immediately made up her mind. She told Ines not to try stopping her, saying she already knew exactly what Rain expected her to do, surprising Ines with how determined she was. Lin gently reminded her that they were siblings, so she understood Ryan better than anyone. Rollo chose to accompany them too, explaining that the creature attacking the capital was most likely being controlled by another demonifolk like him. Noor patted Rollo's head to thank him, which made Lin believe Noor felt sympathy for him. But Noor's thoughts were actually somewhere else. He still wished they had taken home a chunk of the black dragon so he could cook it and try it out. While Ines pushed the carriage back toward the capital, Rain received word that civilians had been safely evacuated. He felt a moment of relief, but his worry returned immediately because they still didn't know where the next attack would come from. Just then, he noticed a strange glowing sphere in the air. He fired a seal-breaking spell at it, and the moment the barrier shattered, his worst nightmare appeared. A gigantic dragon of calamity soared into the skies above the capital. Years ago, back in the present, Noor felt a powerful sensation while riding in the carriage and told Lin something dangerous was nearby. She brushed him off at first, but when she looked for herself, she froze at the sight of the dragon of calamity diving straight toward the city. Inside the capital, the few people who hadn't managed to escape stared up in terror as the beast flapped its wings, destroying rooftops and streets without even touching them. Rain almost lost his composure, realizing just how crazy King Darius truly was, and immediately ordered another evacuation for anyone still in the area. The Sovereign 6 continued fighting off waves of monsters, splitting up to hold the enemy lines. Gilbert, exhausted and bloodied, ran back to the castle to protect King Clay. But Clay refused to leave, saying a king's duty was to stay with his people, even if it meant his death. In the carriage, Lynn sank to her knees. She knew Clay and Ryan would stay behind to help everyone else escape, even if the dragon burned them alive. While she cried over the thought, Noor perked up like he had just seen something cool. He told Lynn he could go help if things were that bad. She stared at him in disbelief and asked how he planned to help. Noor reminded her of what they did against the Goblin Emperor. She had launched him into the air using her wind blast skill. He said she just needed to do the same thing again. Lynn suddenly realized she had been thinking too small. She treated herself like someone weak, while Noor acted like someone who didn't understand the concept of danger. Compared to his brain, even cavemen had better survival instincts. As Lynn prepared the spell, Clay was standing on top of the castle, preparing to face the dragon alone. His mind drifted back to his old argument with Deritus. The day Deritus demanded the dungeon relics, Clay had refused, saying many relics were too dangerous to use. Deritus mocked him for his fear and swore he would take the dungeon by force. Now, Clay stood on the castle tower, thinking about his memories with Lynn before accepting his fate. Meanwhile, Inez offered to help Lynn by creating a cannon-shaped force field, so Lynn could pour all her strength into a supercharged wind blast. Lynn warned Noor that this next launch would be far stronger than the one they used on the Goblin Emperor. Noor tried to tell her to wait, but she had already fired the spell, shooting him into the sky like a missile. At the castle, Clay watched the dragon preparing its ultimate attack, the Elder Breath, a blast so strong it wiped out an entire empire 100 years ago. Knowing he wouldn't survive, Clay gripped a weapon called the Blast Sword. It absorbed the life of whoever wielded it and turned that life into a final attack. Rain and the Sovereign Six realized what Clay was planning and stood helplessly as the king prepared to sacrifice himself. But right before the Elder Breath fired, Noor came crashing in at impossible speed, slamming his sword into the dragon's jaw and knocking the breath sideways into the empty plains. The redirected blast tore through the land, saving the capital. The dragon collapsed, stunned that something so tiny could hit so hard. Furious and humiliated, she whipped her tail at Noor with full power. He blocked it effortlessly, realizing this deadly dragon wasn't even half as scary as the black dragon he just fought. When Lynn launched him, Noor had actually blacked out mid-flight and nearly face-planted into the city. He woke up seconds before impact, boosted himself with physical enhancement, used Feather Step, and then sprinted across the rooftops until he reached the castle. Back on the battlefield, Noor continued fighting the Dragon of Calamity while Lynn, Inez, and Rollo rushed toward the city to help. Suddenly, a massive boulder flew at them. Inez expanded her shield and protected them, only for 3 Goblin Emperors to emerge from the ruins. Lynn's confidence lasted for half a second until she saw all 3 running full speed at them. Just before they reached the group, Rollo panicked and subconsciously used his monster control ability to freeze them in place. Lynn immediately attacked, freezing each goblin solid. Inez followed up by shaping her energy into a massive blade and shattering them into pieces. Lynn stared at Rollo afterward, wondering if he even understood how powerful he truly was. His hands were shaking, fear still all over his face. Back in the air, the Dragon of Calamity finally snapped. Noor kept breaking her claws like they were twigs. She flew upward and tried to unleash another Elder Breath. Noor deflected the beam again with a single swing, shocking Clay and every soldier who saw it. The dragon screamed not from pain, but from embarrassment because Noor wasn't even acknowledging her power. She tried to bite his head off in frustration, but he blocked her jaws and chipped one of her teeth. The dragon collapsed in front of him, completely exhausted, completely defeated. Realizing she no longer wanted to fight, Noor lowered his weapon and sat beside her calmly. After everything she destroyed, he figured ending her life would balance out all the damage she caused. But seeing her surrender, he decided to rest for a moment before deciding what to do next. Right after the dragon stopped moving, Lynn, Inez, and Rollo finally reached Noor. They came running toward him with worried faces, but Noor stood up and told them everything was fine. He even thanked Rollo for helping calm the dragon down. Rollo looked confused and asked what Noor meant. Noor simply said he thought Rollo used his monster powers to make the dragon stop, because there was no way such a huge creature would freeze for no reason. But Rollo told him he really didn't do anything. Noor remembered how Rollo once said people feared his powers, so he thought Rollo was denying it to avoid scaring them. Noor pretended to believe him, and then asked if he could tell the dragon to fly away. Inez warned him that letting a dangerous monster go was risky, and Lynn said they should probably finish the dragon off to be safe. But Noor refused. He said the creature already gave up, so hurting it now was pointless. After thinking about it, the others agreed. Rollo finally said he could try talking to it, but monsters usually only listen to their real master. Noor told him not to worry, and said Lynn and Ines weren't scared of his power at all. Feeling a little better, Rollo walked over to the dragon and spoke to it. When he came back, he said the dragon only wanted to follow its master, and right now, its master was Noor. Lynn and Ines were shocked, but Noor still thought Rollo was joking. He asked again if the dragon could go home. The dragon jumped into the air, but before it got far, a giant laser blasted it straight out of the sky. Everyone froze as the dragon crashed into the mountains. Far away, King Daridas watched it happen and smiled. He looked down at the capital and summoned his full army, getting ready to destroy everything that was left. His mind went back to the day before, when his general showed him their new high-tech weapons. While Daridas bragged about wiping out the Clay Kingdom, a knight named Randus begged him to stop, saying the war would bring nothing good. Daridas ignored him and kicked him aside, claiming nothing could stop him from stealing the dungeon relics. Back to the present, Noor and the others rushed toward the fallen dragon. Rollo suggested checking if it was still alive. While they moved closer, Daridas finally noticed the group. He didn't care about Noor at all. His eyes locked onto Lynn and Ines instead. After hearing that Ines was part of the legendary protectors of the royal family, he got excited and ordered his men to fire the plasma blaster at them. The soldiers activated the cannon, and a massive beam shot toward the group. Lynn grabbed Rollo and jumped into a ditch. Ines raised her divine shield and tried to block it, but even she struggled. Just when the beam was about to break through, Noor stepped in front with the black sword and sliced the attack into pieces. A confused general told Daridas they probably messed up the aim. Daridas yelled at them to fire again. While they prepared a second blast, Noor took a moment to see the size of their army. He asked Ines what the soldiers were planning. Ines said they wouldn't stop until the capital was completely destroyed and suggested they run back to Rain to regroup. Lynn asked Noor if he wanted to retreat too. Noor opened his mouth to say, "Yes, let's run." But before he could finish, Lynn assumed he wanted to fight alongside her. She stood tall, thinking Noor felt the same way. Suddenly, Ines saw another rain of plasma beams heading toward them. She blocked the shots with her shield. Seeing this, Daridas stepped back and told his soldiers to make sure the group never left alive. Noor realized there was only one way to help the others escape. He had to distract the entire army, so he decided to run like he did years ago when he used to hunt for wild honey. He told Lynn and Ines to use the chance to get away. Instead, Lynn used her wind blast spell and launched him into the air before he even finished talking. Noor flew across the sky, blocking blasts mid-air. He landed right in front of over 1,000 soldiers and swung his sword so fast that it knocked every weapon out of their hands at once. Daridas could only stare, unable to understand what he was seeing. Noor sprinted across the battlefield, running circles around the soldiers, knocking out their weapons and breaking through their gear. Soon, swords were raining down from above like metallic raindrops. Only then did Daridas recognize Noor, the nobody he ignored earlier. Noor walked toward Daridas, but the king tried to escape. Then he remembered he was wearing armor made from orichalcum, one of the strongest metals in existence. He picked up his sword, hoping he could fight. Noor didn't even look at him. Instead, he ran past him and threw all their cannons and blasters into the air to destroy them too. The falling weapons nearly smashed Daridas, who collapsed onto the ground trembling. Noor walked back and dropped the black sword in front of him. Seeing the black sword, Daridas remembered it was the same weapon behind Clay's throne, the one Clay needed both hands to lift. Noor used it like it was a toy shovel. The thought made Daridas break mentally. Noor bent down, out of breath, trying to relax so Daridas wouldn't think he was going to kill him. But Daridas only saw a demon preparing to rip out his soul. He quickly climbed onto a horse and ran away as fast as he could. Moments later, Noor's body finally gave out. After fighting non-stop and pushing himself too far, he started to collapse. Before he hit the ground, Mian and Dandalg appeared, takes down the last soldiers. A little while later, Gilbert finally arrives at the battlefield and freezes when he sees the mess Noor created. The whole army was wiped out, and Noor did it alone. Right after that, Sig walks over too, calmly thanks Noor for saving the kingdom, and then joins Gilbert to finish off any soldiers who were still crawling around. Sane notices this and sighs, telling Awaken he specifically told Sig not to kill them. Awaken shrugs and reminds him that if they hadn't fought back, Daridas would have destroyed the capital completely. Sane still insists that capturing the soldiers and questioning them would have been smarter. but when he sees Awaken's worried expression, he awkwardly says he was just joking. Awaken then calls over a group of mages to trap the remaining enemy troops. He raises a giant wall of earth to box them in, and Sane orders his healing squad to keep the surviving ones alive so they can get information out of them. While Dandalg and Mian are still fighting on the other side of the field, Noor finally realizes something huge. The Sovereign Six, the strongest heroes of the kingdom, are the same people who trained him when he was a kid. A few minutes later, Lin uses her magic to fully heal Noor's body, but she still tells him he should rest because he pushed himself way too hard. Noor waves her off and stands up anyway, right in time to hear Sig announce that they just squeezed information out of the captured soldiers. According to them, Daridas's army was the final phase of his plan. Their monster attacks were only the warm-up. Since the danger seemed to be over, Awaken decides it's time to head back. He assumes Daridas must be long gone by now, but Noor tells them he actually saw Daridas escaping earlier. Even after Noor describes the old man's shiny armor, Awaken says chasing him is pointless unless they can somehow fly. That's when Noor suddenly remembers the dragon. He takes everyone to see it. Awaken nearly faints, seeing such a gigantic creature alive, while Sane immediately starts healing it. Sane reminds Awaken of exactly who Noor is, someone with ridiculous talent who has somehow survived everything thrown at him. Awaken then asks if the dragon can carry all of them. Noor explains that the dragon will only listen to Rollo's commands. Surprised, Awaken asks Rollo if he's confident enough to control the beast. Rollo admits he has zero confidence in anything. Awaken starts panicking, thinking they might have just agreed to a guaranteed death sentence. Before Noor can explain who and what Rollo really is, the dragon wakes up and starts yelling at them like it's their fault it got blasted out of the sky. Rollo immediately uses his power to read the dragon's emotions, but Noor can already tell the dragon is super angry. After Rollo says it wants revenge, the group decides to let the dragon take them to Daridas to settle the score. Lin and Ines quickly agree to come along. Noor, on the other hand, remembers how terrified he is of heights, and instantly regrets showing everyone the dragon in the first place. But he still joins. Sane hops on too. Then Karoo arrives and says they'll need his power to hide the dragon, because they'll be flying close to the Empire border. Right then, Clay and Ryan show up. Lin rushes to hug her father, and Inez apologizes for failing her mission. Rain tells her not to blame herself, and Clay tells Rain to go with them and make decisions in his place. Once everyone climbs onto the dragon's back, Rollo gives the command, and the dragon launches into the sky. Dandalg looks at Sig and asks why he hasn't talked to Noor yet. Sig admits that watching Noor handle everything so easily made him realize he had been overestimating his own skill this whole time. A while later, the Elder Dragon reaches a river near the border. They still haven't found Daridas. Karoo warns that they should start turning back, because entering the Empire's sky could get them blasted down instantly. Just then, Lin spots Daridas on a bridge far away. Karoo insists they'll never catch him in time. Rain stays quiet for a moment, thinking it through, then says they have to catch Daridas no matter what. If they let him escape now, he'll rebuild his army and attack again even harder. Ines asks if she can destroy the Empire's defenses. Reen tells her to go wild, saying they might need the broken walls for an escape path later anyway. The Elder Dragon charges straight into the Empire territory. Lin prepares herself for the hardest battle she's ever faced. She looks around and realizes she's surrounded by the strongest people alive. She sees Noor sitting still and assumes he's mentally preparing too, not knowing he actually fell asleep the second the dragon took off. Inside the Empire, Daridas storms back into his palace and screams at his advisors, blaming them for everything that went wrong. Then he sees the Elder Dragon flying toward them and nearly faints trying to understand how it's still alive. When he remembers who Sane is, he completely loses it, shouting at everyone to fix the situation somehow. Randaz tries to calm him down, but Daridas snaps at him and tells him to go fix it himself. Randaz quietly walks out, already thinking of a plan. Daridas then orders his 3 top engineers to activate a secret weapon called the Koranos. All of them panic and warn him it's unstable and could blow up the entire empire. He ignores them. The chief engineer begs him to reconsider. Daridas kicks him into a wall and demands the weapon be used immediately. They pull every ounce of power from the city to activate it. Once it charges, they fire the massive blast straight at the dragon. Noor jumps off the dragon, meets the blast head-on, and knocks it away at the last second, redirecting it into the distance. Daridas freaks out as the blast curves around and heads straight back at them. The engineers remind him that he ordered them to set the weapon that way. Terrified, they drop their tools and quit on the spot, running for their lives. Destabilize sinks to his knees as his empire begins to collapse. Right after that, Noor crashes through the walls of Destabilize's futuristic castle from the impact. Randius and his knights prepare to kill Destabilize themselves, thinking the empire is doomed. Noor suddenly appears and tells them to chill. Randius refuses and orders his knights to attack. Noor easily shoves them aside and pushes Destabilize's head into the floor to protect him. Randius asks if Noor is Destabilize's bodyguard. Noor says he's just preventing them from killing a weak old man who's already helpless. One knight panics and throws a magical grenade. Noor dropkicks Destabilize into a wall to keep him alive again and asks why they're attacking their own emperor. The knights explain their reasons. Destabilize put the lives of every empire citizen at risk. More grenades fly at Noor, but he uses Feather Step to dodge, snatch Destabilize, and slam him back down safely. Noor tells them that Destabilize will probably die on his own soon anyway, so why not just wait? Randius explains that killing Destabilize quickly is the only way to prove to the Clay Kingdom that the Empire never wanted war. Just then, Rain and the others arrive. Lin runs to Noor to check if he's hurt. Rain thanks Noor and says they'll handle the rest. Noor wishes them luck and leaves. He politely greets Randius and the knights on the way out. Rain then explains that Clay's kingdom also doesn't want to fight. They only need Destabilize alive, so he can face punishment for everything he caused. When Destabilize begs for forgiveness, Ryan nods and calmly says he'll forgive him, but only after he suffers the same amount of pain he caused to their citizens. Destabilize looks confused. Sane clears it up. They're going to rip his limbs off and heal him again, repeating the process until justice is served. Destabilize panics so hard he soaks the floor. Later, Lin fully heals Noor again. Noor apologizes when he notices the destroyed mana furnaces in the Empire and says he never meant to break so many things. Lin tells him not to worry. Rain returns and declares the war officially over. With Destabilize imprisoned, the Empire Knights plan to train his grandchild to take the throne someday. Randius and the Knights apologize to Noor for attacking him and thank him for stopping them. Killing Destabilize would have caused a civil war. Noor tells them it's okay and also says sorry for breaking parts of their castle. He thanks them for building such a sturdy one because it probably saved his life when he crashed into it. Randius laughs, finally realizing Noor is just an insanely strong oddball. They promise to help Noor anytime he needs them. Right then, Rollo walks over and says the Elder Dragon is tired of staying in the Empire. So everyone says their goodbyes, climbs on its back, and heads home. After everyone finally returned home, Clay called Noor over right away and asked him to choose any reward he wanted. But, like always, Noor politely said he didn't need anything. Clay kept insisting, so Noor thought for a moment and brought up Rollo. He asked Clay if Rollo could live in the kingdom like a normal citizen and be taken care of properly. Clay was shocked by the request at first, especially since bringing a demon folk into the city could cause problems with Mithra. But after Noor refused every other reward, and even told Clay to use the money to help the people who lost their homes, Clay burst out laughing and agreed. That night, Rollo dreamt about something he had always wished for: eating real food and being helpful without getting beaten for it. When he woke up, he went downstairs and found Anise waiting with dinner. She explained that he would be living with her for now. Rollo quietly sat down, but she noticed he wasn't eating anything, so she told him to go ahead. The moment he took a bite of the bread, tears started pouring down his face because it was the first time in his life he'd tasted normal, comforting food. The next morning, people who evacuated because of the attack slowly started returning home. Noor also went out to check on everyone. He noticed the guild building somehow survived the destruction and found the sign lying on the ground. When he picked it up, he remembered the day the guild master first discovered that Noor couldn't learn any proper skills and refused to register him as an adventurer. Back then, Noor first joined the Swordsman Academy. He brought a permission letter from the guild master, and Sig was surprised that such a young boy wanted to train. After the first day, Sig saw Noor's hands bleeding badly and thought he would quit in less than 2 weeks. But Noor shocked him by lasting much longer and even keeping up with older students. A few days later, Sig introduced boulder training. Every student stepped back in fear, but Noor stayed put, using nothing but his simple parry skill to block it. Even after dislocating his shoulder, he picked up his sword again and kept going. That's when Sig realized something was different about this kid. Noor kept asking Sig to teach him a real skill, so Sig showed him a lightning-fast sword technique. He assumed Noor wouldn't understand anything, but Noor excitedly broke down every single motion Sig made in that split second. Sig was stunned. He realized Noor had insane potential. He even considered shaping him into a literal weapon. But by the end of the course, Noor still only had the parry skill, which wasn't enough for adventurer registration. With a heavy heart, Sig told him to try another class. The next day, Noor joined Dandal's course. The red-haired beastman was confused to see such a skinny kid sign up for the toughest training program. But after a few weeks, Noor was keeping up with Dandal's strongest students. One time, a giant chunk of rock broke loose and fell toward them. Noor stood there, ready to take the hit instead of running. Dandal jumped in to save him and was stunned at the boy's guts. He too wanted to turn Noor into an unstoppable fighter, but by the end, Noor still didn't learn a high-level skill. So, Dandal reluctantly let him go. Then Noor tried Mian's archery course. The moment she saw him, she tried to kick him out. She told him to hit a tiny stick with a rock from a ridiculous distance just to discourage him. But Noor casually hit it twice. That forced her to accept him. Instead of a bow, she made him throw rocks at a shield until he begged for a real weapon. When she finally gave him a bow, he broke every one of them with his insane grip strength. Even her own elite bow snapped in half. Shocked, she asked how he even learned to throw like that. Noor explained that he used to hunt a super-fast bird called the Thunder Flash using rocks. She didn't believe him at first because even expert hunters struggled to catch that bird. Still, by the end of the course, he didn't earn any new skill, so she sent him off but wondered why he even needed more power when he already had crazy stats. Next was the spy course with Caraway. Noor passed every test easily, but still didn't learn the correct skill to be officially recognized. Caraway told him the truth, he had massive potential, but the guild rules were strict, and he couldn't pass him. So Noor immediately enrolled in Awaken's magic class. After weeks of trying, he still couldn't use any real magic. Awaken checked and realized Noor had no mana flow at all. So he advised Noor to try the mana resonance chamber. Awaken told him to leave the moment it felt dangerous. But when he returned days later, he almost fainted. Noor was still inside, perfectly calm. Noor even chased him out because he wanted to keep concentrating. By the end of the course, he could only use a tiny flame spell. Awaken was disappointed until Noor randomly summoned 2 tiny flames, one in each hand, something Awaken himself took 50 years to learn. Still, it wasn't enough to qualify. Finally, Noor went to Sane's healing academy. Sane explained that healers must be born with divine blessings. Noor refused to give up, even when Sane left him outside for weeks in freezing weather. After months of training, Noor only learned low heal. Sane told him that even being able to use that was a miracle. But since it wasn't strong enough for an adventurer license, he had to let Noor go too. The day Noor left the city, Sane called a meeting with the other sovereign members. They were all upset because they knew Noor could surpass them someday. They agreed to get him back and train him together. But Noor had vanished from the city by then. Back in the present, Noor walked into the guild and returned the sign. After chatting about everything that happened, the guild master asked if he wanted a job. The construction team needed workers, so Noor joined right away. As he worked, he thought about everything that had happened these past few days. Meanwhile, Clay and Rain discussed the real reason behind the attack. They figured out that Mithra must have helped Darius because only Mithra could create the Monstones used to control the monsters. Both of them agreed that the kingdom still had huge problems to deal with, but at least they had the Sovereign 6 and an overpowered F-rank adventurer who still didn't realize how strong he was. The next morning, Lynn arrived at the construction site handing out food. When she spotted Noor, she ran straight to him with fresh bread. After eating, Noor smiled and went right back to helping rebuild the city, even saving another worker from falling debris. And that's where this video ends. If you like it, make sure to subscribe our channel for more amazing contents like this. And watch this following video until a new one.